Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm still Seth Monahan, Professor of Music Theory and Analysis, and this is video number 2 in my series on the basics of classical harmony and counterpoint. In this video, we're going to learn all about key signatures. Now, as with major scales in the first video, there's a good chance you probably have seen key signatures before, but it's worth reviewing what they do. A key signature tells you two things. First, and most obviously, it tells you what notes in a given passage or a given piece are modified by accidentals. But it also tells you what notes are in the scale named after that key. Let's see how this works. Here's a 4-flat signature. This is the key of A flat. And with regard to bullet number 1 here, it tells us what notes are modified by accidentals. So anytime you see a note on the B line, it's going to be modified to B flat. Any note on the E line will be an E flat, all A's will be flat, all D's will be flat. Hopefully that's pretty clear. But it also tells us important information about the A flat major scale. Because for any scale, we can assume that all the notes will be natural. They will be white keys except for the ones modified by the key signature. So here are the 7 letter names A through G in order, and to make these into the A flat major scale, we simply apply the accidentals from the key signature. So A becomes A flat, B becomes B flat, so on and so forth, and voila, we have the A flat major scale. Notice that we didn't have to build this from the ground up, adding whole steps and half steps. We simply took what we knew about the key signature and constructed the scale in a flash. So key signatures are a faster, easier way to memorize scales. That's great news. However, you have to also memorize your key signatures. Thankfully, there's an easy way to do this using what's called the circle of fifths. Now, what's the circle of fifths? It's an arrangement of all 12 notes in succession so that each is separated from the next by 7 semitones, or what's called a perfect fifth. So you take C and you go up 7 semitones. That's a perfect fifth. Another 7 semitones takes us to D. Another 7 takes us to A, and so on and so forth. And what's interesting here is that by doing this, we touch on all 12 of the notes once, eventually taking us back to C. Quickly, I want to draw your attention to something curious at the bottom of the circle of fifths. You'll notice for the bottom 3 positions, sort of 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 7 o'clock, there are 2 letter names for each notch in the circle. These are what are called enharmonically related pitches. I've circled here B and C flat. You may know that B and C flat are written differently, but they're in fact the same note on the piano. If I play that note, you can't tell whether I'm playing a B or a C flat, or whether I even know what the difference is. On paper, they're different. They don't sound different on the piano. Same thing with F sharp and G flat, and C sharp and D flat. So at the bottom of the circle, we wrap around using enharmonic relationships, and then we stop as we continue. Why we do this will be clear hopefully in a minute or two, but I wanted to draw your attention to it so you're not confused. Now when it comes to key signatures, the circle of fifths tells us 2 things. First, it tells us how many accidentals are in each key, and it tells us which accidentals are in each key. So let's start with the first of these. And here we're dealing just with major keys. Moving clockwise from C on the circle of fifths, we add a sharp at every station along the circle. So I'm sure you know that the key or the scale of C has no sharps and flats. But when we get to G, we add 1. We get to D, we have 2, 3 sharps in the key of A, 4 sharps in E, 5 in B, 6 in F sharp, and 7 in C sharp. And indeed, by the time we get to C sharp, we've sharpened all 7 notes of the scale. If we go counterclockwise from C, the opposite thing happens with flats. So C has 0 flats, but when you get to F, you're going to have 1 flat in the key signature. B, you're going to have 2 flats. E flat, you're going to have 3 flats, 4 flats, 5 flats, 6 flats with G flat, and then finally C flat, you flatten all the notes. That's 7 flats in the signature or the scale. Now let's deal with which notes receive accidentals. As we move around the circle of fifths, we are always sharpening 1 new note. So C, again, has no sharps and flats, but when we go to G, we sharpen the note F. So notice I'm adding these on the left here. And with each move, we keep the sharps we have and we add a new one. So F stays sharp, now we sharpen C. F and C stay sharpened, now we sharpen G, and so on and so forth. 4 sharps, F, C, G, D. We add A sharp, we add E sharp, we add B sharp. Okay, so now again, when we get to C sharp, all 7 notes are sharped. Now have a look at the order in which we added our sharps. F, C, G, D, A, E, B. If you've memorized your circle of fifths, you'll recognize that that is actually a segment of the circle of fifths. Now how about flats? As is often the case with the circle of fifths, things go opposite on the left side of the circle. So if we move counterclockwise around the circle, we're going to add a flat at each station, keeping the flats we had before. So starting with F, the key of F, we have B flat. The key of B flat, we have B flat and E flat. Then we flatten A, we flatten D, we flatten G, we flatten C, and finally we flatten F. Now we have all 7 notes are flattened. That's the key of C flat major, or the C flat major scale. And since we're in a habit here of noticing patterns, I'll invite you to take a moment to look at this order of flats and see how it relates to the order of sharps. It's the same thing backwards. So if you've memorized the circle of fifths well enough to go backwards around it, which you probably should, B, E, A, D, G, C, F is the segment that tells us which order we add our flats in. Then you'll notice I haven't talked about minor keys yet. We've just been talking about major so far. Thankfully, this is pretty easy. Every major key shares its signature with what's called its relative minor. So I'm going to put these on the inside of the circle. Major keys on the outside in uppercase, minor keys on the inside in lowercase. And let's look at C and its relative minor A. If I just give you a blank key signature, no sharps, no flats, it could be C major, but it could also be A minor. Only context will tell you which one it is. And notice the relationship here between C and A. A is 3 semitones below C. So here's C, C major, there's A minor. So the relative minor is always a minor third below the relative major, and this is true as we go around the circle. E relates to G in the same way, B relates to D in the same way, it's 3 semitones lower. Now one last point in this video is this, and this is crucial. In practice, in the classical style, minor keys always use additional accidentals. That's to say, you're going to routinely see accidentals that are not accounted for in the key signature. Why this happens we'll make very clear in subsequent videos, but for now you should know that because of these additional accidentals, we end up with multiple minor scales, not just one minor scale, but actually 3, which you may have come across in your studies before this. That will be the subject of video 3. I hope to see you there.